Our objectives for today are number one, we're going to identify and contrast the 11 major body systems and their functions. Number two, we're going to explain homeostasis. And number three, we're going to see how positive feedback and negative feedback affect homeostatic regulation. First, we're going to list the 11 body systems. Number one is the integumentary system. Number two is the skeletal system. Number three is the muscular system. Number four is the nervous system. Number five is the endocrine system. Number six is the cardiovascular system. Number seven is the lymphatic system. Number eight is the respiratory system. Number nine is the digestive system. Number 10 is the urinary system. And number 11 is the reproductive system, with A being the male reproductive system and B being the female reproductive system. Let's explain homeostasis. It's a state where all body systems work together to maintain a stable internal environment. The systems respond to an external or internal changes to function within a normal range. For example, body temperature and fluid balance. When a body is in homeostasis, it's healthy, it's well. When homeostatic mechanisms begin to fail, the human being doesn't feel well. They start to feel sick or have pain. And in the extreme case of homeostasis is death. Now, there's two types of regulation. There's something called autoregulation, that's intrinsic. It's an automatic response in a cell or tissue or organ to some environmental change. Then there's a second type of regulation that's called extrinsic regulation. These are responses controlled by the nervous system and the endocrine system. In negative feedback, it's the number one mechanism that allows the homeostasis of the body's internal environment. An example of negative feedback would be the hypothalamus. It's the part of the brain that controls body temperature. If body temperature increases above 98.6, the muscles relax, the blood vessels dilate, and that allows the body to sweat and cool itself off. This is how it would work. When homeostasis is in a normal body temperature, the body's working and functioning normally. Then normal temperature becomes disturbed. The body temperature rises. That's a stimulus. The receptors are the temperature sensors on the skin and in the hypothalamus. That is the receptor, and that affects the control center. That sends a command to the sweat glands, to the skin to increase secretion, and the blood vessels in the skin to dilate. That's a response. The heat is lost and the body temperature drops, and normal body temperature is returned to normal. This is a stimulus response process. Positive feedback is a different condition. It's a condition that's very rare. It's a reaction to an event that increases the changes of the original condition instead of rejecting it. For example, during a cold, a fever increases body tissue's temperature to kill a virus or kill a bacteria. Example number two, when you get a nosebleed or a cut on the skin, you keep bleeding until a clot forms and returns to homeostasis or stops the blood flow. And then an extreme case would be an allergy, and that requires an EpiPen or adrenaline for an insect or food allergies that are life-threatening. The example with the bleeding would be this case. There would be a cut. There's damage to the blood vessel wall. It releases the chemicals that begin the process of blood clotting. As the blood begins to move, it brings clotting chemicals or platelets. It starts a chain reaction where soluble proteins in the blood begin to form a clot. The clotting continues. Each step releases further chemicals to increase the process. So clotting accelerates. This escalating process is a positive feedback loop that ends in the formation of a blood clot, which patches the vessel wall and stops the bleeding. This is a picture of with an example of a blood clot on the ear that stopped bleeding. Now, let's go to the actual 11 body systems, and what we're going to do is name their major organ and then name the major function. The first system we named was the integumentary system. The major organ of the integumentary system is the skin. It's also the largest organ in the body, and the major function, it protects against environmental hazards. Next is the skeletal system. The major organs would be the bones, and the major function would be to provide support and protection for other tissues. Next would be the muscular system. The major organs of the muscular system would be the skeletal muscles, and the major function would be to provide movement or produce movement. Next would be the nervous system, with the major organ being the brain and spinal cord, and the major function would be directs immediate response to stimuli. Next would be the endocrine system. The major organ would be the pituitary gland in the endocrine system, the master gland, and it would direct the long-term changes in the activities of the other organ systems. Next would be the cardiovascular system, with the major organ being the heart and the major function distributing blood cells, water, and dissolved materials, including nutrients, waste, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. Next would be the lymph system, or the lymphatic system, or the lymphoid system. The major organ would be the spleen, the thymus gland, and the lymph nodes. And the primary function or major function would be to defend against infection and disease. Next would be the respiratory system, with the major organ being the lungs, and the major function being to deliver air to the alveoli, sites in the lungs where gas exchange occurs. Next would be the digestive system, with the major organ being the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, with the major function being to process and digest the food, then absorb nutrients, ions, water, and the breakdown of products of dietary sugars, proteins, and fats. Next is the urinary system, with the major organ being the kidneys and the major function being to excrete waste products from the blood. Finally, the 11th and last system is the reproductive system. It can be divided into two individual systems called the male reproductive system, with the major organ being the testes and the major function being to produce male sex cells, sperm, and then hormones. Finally, the last reproductive system would be the female reproductive system, with the major organs being the ovaries and the mammary glands, and the major function being to produce female sex cells, oocytes, or eggs, and hormones. It also is involved in supporting the developing embryo from conception to delivery.